The danger of the framework prism. Max says, okay, these 7 axes are powerful, but wait, what about first principles?
Ah, yes. First
Right,
principles.
we hear Silicon Valley executives talking about first principles thinking all the time. Max asks, isn't first principles the ultimate coordinate?
It is a very common conflation, and Claude immediately clarifies the structural distinction. First principles thinking, the practice of boiling a problem down to its absolute, unquestionable fundamental truths and reasoning up from there, is not a coordinate axis of reality. It is an operating method.
Let's go back to our map analogy to make sure this is crystal clear for the listener.
Sure.
If the 7 meta models, entropy, emergence, Bayesian updating, are the actual latitude and longitude lines drawn on the map of reality, first principles is a compass you hold in your hand to navigate those lines.
That is the perfect distinction. The compass is a vital tool. It tells you how to break a problem down and find your bearings. But the compass itself does not represent a fundamental law of physics like entropy does.
Right.
First principles is a technique for utilizing the coordinates. It is not a coordinate itself.
Once Max understands this, he asks a question that, frankly, terrified me when I read it.
What was it?
He looks at these 7 incredibly powerful acts and he says, if these are universally true, should I hardwire them into my brain? Should I write them into my permanent operating manual for how to live my life? Or, if I do that, will these coordinates eventually trap me?
And Claude's response is a resounding, definitive yes. If you hardwire them, they will absolutely trap you.
That's a scary thought.
It introduces the most vital warning of the entire dialogue. Claude invokes Charlie Munger's famous cautionary proverb. To a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
This is the danger of the framework prison. I want you listening to imagine this scenario. You take this deep dive to heart, you write down these 7 axes on a card and carry it everywhere.
Okay.
Tomorrow evening, your partner comes to you, clearly frustrated, and says, you haven't been listening to me lately. I feel like we're drifting apart.
Uh-oh.
Right?
Right.
If you were locked inside the framework prison, you might look at them and say, I know what this is. This is an issue of entropy. A relationship is a closed system that has lacked sufficient energy input, leading to a natural decay into disorder. Therefore, I must initiate a positive feedback loop of active listening to counter the entropic drift.
Which, while technically employing the vocabulary of reality, would be an incredibly effective way to ensure your partner leaves the room and you sleep on the couch.
Exactly. You have taken a fluid, nuanced, emotionally complex human interaction and violently forced it into a rigid analytical box.
So destructive.
If you force every single problem at your job, every creative block in your art, and every conflict in your relationships into the Bayesian box or the emergence box, the frameworks stop acting as lenses that help you see the world clearly. They mutate into a prison that dictates how you are allowed to see the world.
And the deep irony here is that doing so explicitly violates axis number 7. The map is not the territory. By forcing the messy reality of a human relationship into an entropic checklist, you are mistaking your brilliant, newly acquired map for the actual, breathing territory of life.
So how do we avoid this?
To solve this dilemma, Claude offers a profound operational shift. He distinguishes between using frameworks as rigid operating instructions versus treating them as objects of observation.
Break that down for us. What is the behavioral difference between those two approaches?
If you treat a framework as an operating instruction, you approach a complex problem and command your brain from the top down. I must solve this problem using the evolutionary model.
You're forcing it.
You are aggressively imposing the framework onto reality. It makes your thinking rigid and brittle. But if you treat the framework as an object of observation, your posture is entirely different.
How so?
You look closely at the messy, unstructured problem first. Then, you gently hold the evolutionary framework up to it, almost like trying on a pair of glasses, and you ask, I wonder if this situation naturally fits an evolutionary model. Let me observe.
I see.
You note where the model successfully illuminates the problem, and, crucially, you note the exact places where the model completely fails to explain the reality in front of you.
It's the difference between looking at a piece of hardware and saying, this is a nail, therefore I must hit it with my hammer, versus looking at it and saying, is this a nail? Let's gently see if the hammer works. Oh, wait, it has threads. It's a screw. I will put the hammer away and go find a screwdriver.
Perfect analogy. Observation preserves your flexibility and your humility. Operation creates blind dogma.
Which brings us to the philosophical climax of the source material. Part 4. The ultimate goal, catching the fish and forgetting the trap.
This is where it all comes together.
Max has clearly been put through an existential ringer during this conversation. He has learned the models, confronted his own psychological resistance to them, and recognized the danger of becoming trapped by them. So he asks the ultimate question.
He essentially says, okay, Claude, if I shouldn't hardwire these models into my brain, if my life's purpose isn't just to flawlessly execute Bayesian updates and inversion exercises until the day I die, then what is my purpose? What is the point of spending years learning all this complex architecture?
It is a breathtaking moment of vulnerability in the dialogue.
It is. And Claude actually pauses the intellectual sparring to praise Max for it.
Yeah.
He points out the profound, rare self-awareness required to spend years painstakingly building a massive, powerful, intellectually intoxicating structure of knowledge, and then to possess the humility to stand back, look at it, and ask, why should I surrender myself to this creation?
It takes an immense amount of ego and drive to build the intellectual tower. But it takes profound wisdom to realize you shouldn't lock the door and live inside it. So how does Claude answer him?
To answer this ultimate existential question, Claude transcends Western analytical mathematical thought entirely. He reaches back thousands of years into ancient Eastern philosophy.
Wow.
He introduces a concept from the foundational Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi, the metaphor of the fish trap. In Chinese, the phrase is 一丝no.
Let's translate and deeply unpack this metaphor for everyone listening because it is visually stunning.
These do.
Imagine an ancient fisherman. He is weaving a complex, intricate trap out of bamboo. He spends countless hours making sure the lattice is perfectly tight, calculating the exact angle of the entrance so the fish can swim in but cannot swim out.
It's a masterpiece of engineering.
Right. He wades into the river and sets it. Hours later, a fish swims inside. The fisherman pulls the heavy trap out of the water, opens the hatch, and takes the fish into his hands. He has secured his dinner. What does he do next?
He doesn't strap that heavy, soaking wet bamboo trap to his back and carry it with him everywhere he goes for the rest of his life.
Exactly. He puts it down on the riverbank, he forgets it. The entire purpose of the trap was to catch the fish. Once the fish is in your hands, the trap is entirely obsolete.
It is a flawless metaphor. What Claude is revealing to Max and what this deep dive is proposing to you is that these magnificent mental frameworks, the 7 axes of reality, the intricate mechanics of Bayes and entropy and emergence, they are merely the woven bamboo. They are the trap. They are not the goal itself.
That begs the question, though, what is the fish? What are we actually trying to catch here?
The fish is a state of intuitive wisdom. It is pure, unfiltered judgment. It is the ability to perceive reality clearly, to understand the complex flow of events in human nature without needing to consciously filter every single interaction through a rigid checklist.
Think about when you first learned to drive a car. You relied heavily on a mental framework. Check the rearview mirror, check the side mirror, apply the brake with 3 pounds of pressure, turn the steering wheel exactly 10 degrees.
You were highly conscious of the framework. It was exhausting.
But a master driver with 20 years of experience, they don't think about the rules. They don't recite a checklist. They just drive. The framework has been entirely absorbed into their subconscious intuition.
They have caught the fish of driving, and they have forgotten the trap of the instruction manual.
That gives me chills. The goal of learning the rules is to absorb them so deeply you no longer need them.
Yes.
And Claude doesn't just leave this concept in ancient China. He connects this Eastern philosophical metaphor directly to one of the most rigorous, dense works of 20th century Western logic.
He invokes the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein and his masterwork, the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus.
A very heavy read.
Extremely heavy. In this book, Wittgenstein spent years meticulously constructing an absolute, flawless, mathematically rigid framework of logic to explain the exact relationship between language and reality. It is one of the most complex, difficult philosophical traps ever woven.
And what's the punchline?
In the very final propositions of the book, after forcing the reader to climb this massive intellectual structure, Wittgenstein essentially writes, "My propositions serve as elucidations in the following way. Anyone who understands me eventually recognizes them as nonsensical. They are a ladder. You must climb up the ladder to see the world rightly, but once you have climbed it, you must kick the ladder away."
Kick the ladder away. It is the exact same concept, separated by continents and millennia.
It really is.
You must build the structure. You
Yeah.
must use the structure to elevate your perspective above the noise. But then you must deliberately abandon the structure so you aren't burdened by carrying it.
So what is the ultimate core takeaway for the listener here? It is a paradox that requires immense balance.
Right.
You must do the hard work of learning the models. You must master the coordinates of entropy, evolution, and inversion. You cannot skip the work. You have to weave the bamboo trap. You have to build and climb the ladder. But you must cultivate the supreme self-awareness to know the exact moment when those models shift from expanding your vision to restricting it.
You own the tools. The tools do not own you. If you become a rigid disciple of your own mental models, you have catastrophically confused the map for the territory.
You are bowing down and worshiping the bamboo fishing trap while you are slowly starving to death.
Worshipping the trap while starving to death. Man, that is heavy.
Okay, let's pull back and trace the arc of this incredible intellectual journey we've just been on.
We've covered a lot. We really have. We started by mapping the absolute basement of reality, the 7 meta-models of the universe. We looked at the shifting probabilities of Bayesian updating, the relentless decay of entropy, the blind genius of evolutionary algorithms, the spiraling nature of feedback loops, the magic of emergence, the problem-solving power of inversion, and the ultimate humility of knowing the map is never the territory.
And from that high vantage point, we descended into the painful, messy physics of our own minds. We explored the deep cognitive and emotional resistance that makes it so terrifying to dismantle our old beliefs.
We busted the myth of laziness, recognizing that tearing down identity-bound frameworks requires a heavy, unrewarding, chaotic energy that our neurobiology desperately wants to avoid.
We recognized the absolute rigid danger of the framework prison, how turning a fluid observation into a rigid operating instruction turns you into the man with a hammer who only sees a world of nails.
And finally, we arrived at the ultimate philosophical summit, Zhuangzi's fish trap and Wittgenstein's ladder. The profound realization that all intellectual frameworks, no matter how brilliant, are just temporary structures. They are meant to be climbed, utilized, and ultimately left behind in the pursuit of true, intuitive wisdom.
It is a complete breathing cycle of intellectual growth, deliberate construction, rigorous application, and finally, intentional deconstruction.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, completely new angle to mull over, a thought that builds on everything we've wrestled with today.
Okay.
We've established and agreed that the ultimate goal is to catch the fish of pure wisdom and throw away the trap of mental models. But here is the agonizing practical question. How do you know when you've actually caught the fish?
The trap of false mastery.
Exactly. Think about it in your own life. Are you trusting your pure intuition because you've genuinely mastered the axes of reality, absorbed them deeply into your subconscious, and successfully transcended your frameworks? Or are you just wandering blind, making terrible destructive decisions based entirely on your own unexamined emotional biases, simply because you arrogantly threw your tools away way too early?
It is the ultimate tightrope walk of the human mind. To abandon the frameworks too early is pure arrogance and ignorance. But to hold on to them too long is rigidity and dogma.
Which brings us right back to the very first question of the show, doesn't it? The sheer terrifying difficulty of unlearning. Maybe the real reason we fight so desperately hard to hold on to our old, broken mental models isn't just because we are stubborn or loss-averse.
Why do you think it is?
Maybe it's because deep down we are terrified that if we kick the ladder away, we won't magically float in a state of pure, enlightened wisdom. We'll just fall.
And that tension, that terrifying, exhilarating space between the safety of the ladder and the freedom of the sky is the exact space where true learning actually happens.
It's the space where you have to be brave enough to do the work. To everyone listening, thank you for bringing your time, your curiosity, and your courage to this deep dive. Because exploring the strange, resistant, beautiful architecture of your own mind is, without a doubt, the greatest adventure you can undertake. Stay curious.